Hello everyone, you are watching Deceptive Logic, How Truth Seekers Go Wrong. When you've been around the block a few times, you know that even people who seem to have good intentions and know what they're talking about can be wrong. In fact, these people can not only be wrong, but dead wrong. How can this be, and how can we guard against doing this ourselves? The problem. The two biggest problems that cause people to be wrong, despite appearing to have good intentions and good reasoning, is presumption and dishonesty. We all presume things to a point, and it's not always bad to do so. However, we need to be able to recognize presumption, and we should try to avoid it when we can. On the other hand, dishonesty is never good and should always be avoided. While presumption stems from a lack of evidence and/or understanding, dishonesty stems from a lack of integrity and care for the truth. The first causes people to make mistakes. The second causes people to intentionally twist the facts as they find it convenient. Golf as an analogy. How does it happen that someone who seems to have good data and good logic ends up with a completely wrong conclusion? The answer is simple. A little fudge here, a little fudge there, and then a big leap to patch it all together. Let me give you an analogy. A man is playing 9 holes of golf. By the end of the game, he had swung at the ball a total of 52 times. Since the course has a total par of 31, he scores himself at 21 strokes over par. What is the problem with this picture? He didn't include the times he hit the ball into water hazards and out of bounds, which are supposed to add extra strokes to his score. Why did he do this? He was so bad at golf, counting penalties into his score would be overkill. That sounds reasonable, but what happens when he compares his score to someone else's? Would it be an accurate gauge of skill to compare one man who scores himself incorrectly with another who scores himself correctly? Obviously not. So when our bad golfer does compare himself to other more experienced golfers, the results will be wrong. The reasoning seems sound in the middle of the game, but the conclusion is off. He shouldn't compare himself to others if he's going to play by different rules. The serpent as an example. In Genesis 3, a serpent tries to deceive Eve into eating fruit from a particular tree. But to do so, he must contradict what God previously said to Adam. Before we read how the serpent gets Eve to eat the fruit, let's see what God actually said to Adam. In Genesis chapter 2, verse 16, God said to Adam, "You may freely eat of every tree of the garden, but you shall not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. From the day that you eat of it, you will surely die." Now, in Genesis chapter 3, verses 1 through 7, it says, "Now the serpent was more subtle than any animal of the field which the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, 'Has God really said, you shall not eat of any tree of the garden?' The woman said to the serpent, 'We may eat fruit from the trees of the garden, but not the fruit of the tree which is in the middle of the garden. God has said, you shall not eat of it. You shall not touch it, lest you die.' The serpent said to the woman, 'You won't really die, for God knows that in the day you eat it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil.' When the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise, she took some of its fruit and ate. Then she gave some to her husband with her, and he ate it too. Their eyes were opened, and they both knew that they were naked. They sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves." Now let's examine what the serpent actually did. How can a serpent contradict God and sound convincing? The answer is, he uses logic that appeals to his listeners. First, he overemphasized his opponent's point to make it sound unreasonable. He said, "Has God really said?" Then, after Eve corrected him, Although not completely, since she over-exaggerated what God said as well, the serpent directly contradicted what God said. He said, "You won't really die." Finally, he gave a reasonable-sounding purpose for the command, as if corroborating his previous statement, which caused Eve to doubt God's intentions. He said, "For God knows." Notice that some of his words were actually honest. God did say they would die, as the serpent implies when he said, "You won't really die," and their eyes were opened when they ate the fruit, making them know the difference between good and evil. The details seemed relatively reasonable and convincing, which is why even her husband ate the fruit, but the results were way off from what Eve expected. Solution. First and foremost, have integrity. Don't look for answers that suit you or are good. Look for the best answers, answers that are true. Second, try to avoid presumption. Instead, aim to get your facts from multiple sources and try not to talk about issues you don't understand. Although we all make mistakes, no human can be expected to be perfect. I've made many presumptions in the past, and that doesn't mean they were all wrong. Third, be open to criticism from individuals experienced in what you've talked about, and be open to getting new leads, resources, ideas, and opinions from people even if they aren't experienced in what you've talked about. You may be surprised how much someone can help you even when they don't know what they're talking about, just by bringing up new subjects and new angles for you to look into.